Hi, I'm Anna Clarkson from Parenting Behind the Behavior, and I'm here today with Brook Berg, Pattie Carroll, and Lori Zierl. And we are all from the Division of Extension at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Today we have a colleague and parent joining us who has a question for us, and her name is Jenna Klink. So I'm going to turn it over to Jenna.
Thanks, Anna. My question is related to my son. He's 6 years old, and he has anxiety that kind of shows itself in different ways. Like sometimes he just gets nervous and is putting his fingers in his mouth, or he has some separation issues still, or he just, doesn't do as well with change and transitions as my 8-year-old does, but even when she was younger. And I'm just curious, how to deal with this as a parent, especially, there's differing opinions from me versus my parents and their dad of sort of like toughing it out. So for example, like take your hands out of your mouth, boy, versus, I don't know, maybe trying to talk to him about it. But when I try to stop and talk to him about it, it can be a really drawn out process. And how do you know when to just kind of put your foot down and when to, I don't know, sit and talk to them and explore what's going on?
Thanks, Jenna.
Really, really good question, Jen. I think many of us as educators and as parents have faced many similar things. I know, Anna, you've shared some stories too about your little ones. So hopefully you can share some tips with Jenna too, but I just wanted to say that number one, it's normal, especially during this time like of COVID and being home and just all of the changes that are happening. And you're right, anxiety presents itself in many, many different ways. So I have elementary, middle school age kiddos, and one who is diagnosed with general anxiety disorder, and hers really doesn't present itself necessarily in worry. It presents itself in irritability and anger, and low self-esteem. And we've seen that during these changing times because she is such an overachiever. And so having her work done in a different way and just having school and our whole lives in a different way can be really challenging. And it is hard to know like when to push them through. And really you're your child's best advocate and you know your child the best. And so being able to be really supportive and walk them through some of those things that are making them feel anxious. It's like we're detectives and we're trying to figure out, what those triggers are and how we can help them work through that. And sometimes just asking them like, what is the worst that could happen? And like walking through that whatever's making them super anxious can help them. One of the things that we had to do in our house because sleep was an issue was actually remove the clock from the bedroom because our kiddos were having trouble falling asleep because of worry and anxiety, and just like physically removing that clock was helpful. So
I was thinking too. Oh, go ahead, Lori.
I just think Jenna brings up an important thing to acknowledge too, that many of us have more than one child. And we expect that our second child is going to act a little bit like our first child, or at least we think they are. And that what worked on our first child should work on the second child. And that doesn't always happen. And acknowledging that they have different personalities and different temperaments helps you realize that when you have to use a different strategy that seems maybe a little more permissive to some people, that's okay. That child needs that attention in a different way. And they might need more of your time. And there's a lot of guilt that comes with that too, because you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm, ignoring my other child. And you're not. You're doing what's best for, your son. And your daughter will learn through your patience and perseverance that that's a skill that she'll probably move forward in her life as well.
Thank you. Just that permission to know that it's okay to spend that extra time, that feels really helpful.
I was thinking too that it is always okay to validate our children's emotions. So I was thinking, with young children, a lot of times their fears or their worries seem inconsequential to us. They're like, really? You're afraid of the toothbrush? Okay. But they're very real to them, right? And so when we step in and say, you are scared of playing that chase game with your uncle or grandpa or something. Let's see if there's something else you guys can do together that you would enjoy. We're telling them that, like, I see you, and those emotions, it's okay and it's real to feel worried and to feel anxious, and we can work through this together. And so I think validating and noticing those emotions is key. And then we can also give even really young children tools. And I think, like Brooke and Lori mentioned some of those tools, but tools to like move through their anxiety or their worry as well. So I was thinking about, a really common worry for young children is being separated from their moms and dads, like when they're leaving, when they're going to be cared for by another adult, whether it's daycare or staying at, someone's home. And so some children really have trouble with that transition, and we can talk to them ahead of time about like a special ritual, something that's loving and connecting that helps them move through that like transition where maybe they're having anxiety or worry. So like a really little child, but maybe even a big child, but maybe in private, you can give a kiss in their hand and say, I'm going to be with you in this kiss all day long. And anytime you need a kiss, it's right here. And then with confidence, we can, say goodbye and pass them on to, their daycare provider or whatever. And they not only have that tool then of being able to access that kiss all day to help them feel calm, but they also saw your calm, and you model like, this is how I can talk about anxiety or worry, but also move through it.
You know why I love that so much, Anna, is because anxiety and mental health in teenagers and young adults continues, right? And there are other things in the environment, or like Brooke was saying with COVID-19, but anything can cause teenagers. It's a very stressful time of life. And the key to helping teenagers with anxiety really revolves around solid, strong relationships with caring adults. And when that is established, when there is a trust established between the caring adult, whether it's a parent or other caring adult, when they're young, that can carry through for teenagers. And when Anna said to acknowledge and affirm the feelings, I'm going to take it a step further, even for the kiddos and the little kids, but especially with teenagers. This thing called empathy goes a long way. And teenagers particularly are looking for understanding and empathy. They need to be understood. And a lot of times we spend time telling them, or even adolescent children that age, telling them maybe how not to feel versus just understanding their feelings. And so I really appreciate what you were saying about that, Anna.
And we get so much input from others around us. And Jenna, you mentioned, parents, grandparents, friends, about what they think you should do. And I think about Pattie talking about teenagers. We have these natural, and sometimes not natural, but we kind of understand some of these developmental stages. And if they don't reach them because of their anxiety, we get really worried. So my daughter was afraid of storms, and her bedroom is on the west side where the wind and the rain and the hail would hit. She, during storms, would just grab her blanket and pillow and crawl into our bedroom, lay in a corner on the floor till the storm was over, got up, and people were like, what do you mean? She's 16. And I'm like, what's the harm? She just laid there until the storm passed, crawled back into her bed. She's an adult now. She's 30 years old. She's perfectly fine with storms. But the more you allow them to have those feelings and acknowledge those feelings, the quicker they'll get past that. When you keep denying them, it's like a roadblock to them getting beyond those fears and anxieties.
Wow, that is just mind-blowing, that to actually kind of give in and go with what they want, that could actually result in the issue resolving faster. Because I know what I hear is like, it's more of the strict approach that, well, you have to teach them now or this is never going to change, you know, but it's always going against, in those situations where I've gotten that advice, it's going against what the child wants or needs in that moment, because it's our job as a parent to make sure they turn out okay.
Absolutely.
It's so hard, and it's hard to know like when to push them a little bit and when to help them stretch their thinking. But I think the key behind all of that is really, as a parent and a caregiver, really trying to understand where that's coming from and what it is, like what that fear and anxiousness is. Like I said before, sort of being that detective and having that strong relationship and knowing that it's, like Lori said, like it was okay. It was a safe place for her daughter to come and do that and work through that in a safe way. And it wasn't then continuously waking the parents up. Like there were some boundaries likely that were set in that. So it's not like just being permissive and, oh, you're anxious or worried. Or, for example, when I was talking about my daughter, you know, with all of the notifications and like everything that's coming at her for school online in this virtual setting was really getting to her. I didn't say like, oh, that's fine, you can just, you know, skip doing the work. I get it, you're anxious about it. It was like, no, we need to come up with a plan that works for her in this moment, because her feelings are real, which was honestly hard for her dad to understand how that's real, because she's a high achieving straight A student. So she should be able to do this work. And yeah, you know, it's easy for us to think that, but she right now, her mental health is putting a halt on that and saying, no, I'm really anxious about this. And so how do we work through it in a way that isn't just permissive, where you're like, oh, okay, let the anxious feelings roll, but really trying to understand, like Pattie said, build those relationships so that you can have those conversations and work through it in a supportive, nurturing fashion, rather than just sort of laying down the law and saying like, move past it, but like really walking alongside your child to be able to move through those things. And they change throughout their, you know, one time it's separation anxiety, and then it's storms, and then it's, who knew that we were going to be having anxiety over online learning for months. I mean, you just knew things are coming up all of the time. So to be able to be responsive to that is important.
And Brooke brought up a really good, when she was talking, it made me think about another tool or idea in helping a child through anxiety is that relationship building piece of having the conversation with them, but also helping them be a problem solver. How do you think we can handle this, you know, kiddo? Like, I can tell you're anxious. And sometimes kids can't even verbalize what it is. What is it that's making them anxious? There's just something that's off in their little world and they're anxious. So then going back to them and empowering them, helping them feel like they have a little control. What do you think? And, you know, these are principles in other parenting classes, but, you know, would you, you know, maybe that your child would say, I don't know, Mom, I don't know. And then you can just ask, do you want to hear some ideas? You know, maybe I can help you figure this out a little bit. And then you just tell them, I trust that you're gonna figure this out, because you can do this. You are capable of figuring this out. But I'm right here. I like that when Brooke said walking beside your child, you know, not doing it for them, but walking beside them, because anxiety is real for all of us.
That's really helpful. I really like the idea of approaching my kids with the curiosity too, and the detective. It, like, I know all of us have different passions. Like for me, I like to read. It almost makes me think that, you know, like knowing my own kids as much as you would learn reading a book, or as much as if you took a class in high school, that the amount of energy you put into learning that subject, it's really the individualized nature of each of those kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Jenna. That's a beautiful summary. And we know, I mean, we really know, and I think these examples show that supportive parenting can help children move through their worries and anxieties. And so supportive parenting looks like, you know, noticing and validating their emotions. It looks like problem solving together. It looks like setting kind of small steps that feel achievable to them so that they can move toward this bigger goal in how they can function in life or in your family. And just as a reminder, feeling worried, anxious, afraid is normal for children. But if you're thinking it's more than just everyday anxieties, it's always okay to consult a doctor or a therapist or a school counselor. And those are professionals who are really prepared to walk your family through skills. Take care, everybody.